Good morning, students, and welcome to this Zoom session. I think a few more will join us a little later, but in any case, I'm going to begin because this is quite a long session. So we now come to the important part of the module, which is SSD, that is Specific Skills Development. And in SSD, we focus on what you are going to be doing as a teacher, the core functions of a teacher, that is preparing lessons and teaching of the lessons. So this particular part of the module is focused on lesson planning and lesson presentation. So before I begin to discuss lesson planning in detail, I want you to first look at the lesson plan format. In other words, how you will be preparing your lessons. What headings must you follow? What kind of structure that you need to follow? So I want to firstly share the screen with you with regard to the lesson plan format, and then we will look at how to fill that lesson plan. Okay, so this is the lesson plan structure. In other words, this is the format that you will use to prepare your lesson plans. No other format is allowed. This is the university requirement. The university wants you to do all your lesson plans following this format, right? So you also need to include a draft lesson plan, which is in the form of a spider diagram, which I will show you a little later as well. So in your lesson plan structure, we start off with a table like this, where you have to put the date. Now, especially when you are in a school situation, you have to put the date and the day, the name of the school, and here your student name and number, right? Student name and number. Then you need to write down which grade you are teaching. Now, you know, in a school situation, you have grade 10A, 10B, 10C. So you need to put down exactly which grade you are teaching in. If you're teaching in grade 10B, you must put 10B there. What subject are you teaching? So here, the subject, if you are teaching mathematics, you will put down mathematics. What topic are you teaching? Now, the topic is normally taken from the CAPS document, which we will look at a little later. So all the topics that you will teach in a classroom is given to you in the CAPS document. So let's say you are going to be teaching triangles. So you'll just write triangles over there. Your content and concept area, actually concept should come first, concept and content. The concept is under this heading of triangles, under this topic of triangles. What are you going to be, excuse me, what are you actually going to be teaching? So maybe you are going to be looking at the 4 or 3 different types of triangles. So that would be the concepts that you're going to teach, the different types of triangles, right? And for each type, there will be some content material, which we will discuss later. Then CAPS page number, where is this in the CAPS document, right? Where is this topic in the CAPS document? And the duration of the lesson. Now, the lesson that you do, the one lesson that you are teaching, will normally last 1 hour, right? It cannot be 3 hours, 2 hours, and things like that. The duration of the lesson is given to you by, when you go to the school has a timetable. And the timetable tells us how many periods in the day And each period normally in the school situation is 1 hour. Some schools have it at 45 minutes. So you must put down how long your lesson is going to be. So that is the table that you will fill at the beginning of your lesson plan. The next important thing in your lesson plan is specific aims. Now, this specific aims, you get it from the CAPS document, right? I will discuss that when we look at the PowerPoint of the lesson plans. The specific aim is taken directly from the CAPS document. In the CAPS document, there is a place there where they write the specific aim for the subject. You have to select the aim that is related to your topic, right? They will give you about 5 or 6 different specific aims in the CAPS document. You do not write all the specific aims. You just got to choose one specific aim that is related to your topic. Now, the next heading, which is important, is called lesson objectives. Now, what are these lesson objectives? Objectives are when you teach this lesson, what do you aim to achieve at the end of the lesson? So why are we teaching this lesson? Because we are going to be conveying knowledge to our learners. We're going to make them do something with the knowledge. When they do something with the knowledge, they are displaying their skills. And we are also going to give them some value. In other words, whatever we teach them, they will be able to apply it in their daily lives, right? So the next important heading is approach or teaching strategy. That means, how are you going to be teaching this? You're not lecturing like I am doing. You are going to teach. And there are many teaching methods. You can do question and answer method. You can do explanation. You can do group work with the learners. You can do role playing. There are many, many ways in which you teach, right? So we need to know what kind of method are you using here to teach this topic. Resources, what resources are you going to use in this lesson? So resources means, like, are you going to use a chart? Are you going to use a PowerPoint presentation? Are you going to use real life, like if you're teaching biology or if you're teaching plant life, are you going to use plants? Things like that. What resources are you going to be using? Now, in a lesson, the lesson is just like how you write an essay. It starts with an introduction. You need to introduce your topic to your learners. You cannot start your lesson just by walking into the class and saying, good morning, class. Today, our topic is the circular flow of money. So this is how the money flows. Now, you can't start your lesson like that. You got to introduce the topic to the learners, right? You got to introduce the topic. Like if I'm going to do the circular flow of money, I will introduce it by calling learners out to the front and labeling each learner like the consumer, the government, the producer, and show how money circulates among the main components of the economy. So you got to introduce the topic first before you start discussing it in detail, right? So introduction, you have to write in detail how you're going to introduce the topic. Now, you will see here in this lesson plan format, they give you small spaces, but what happens when you type in that space, it expands. It doesn't mean that you're just going to write 1 or 2 sentences there. You will see the example lesson plans we give you just now. So as I said, lesson planning is just like how you write an essay. You introduce the lesson, then you develop the lesson. The development part of the lesson is the most important phase of your lesson. This is where you are going to be introducing the new knowledge to the learners. This is where you are actually going to teach them and make them understand the new knowledge. And this is where your teaching strategies come in. How are you going to make them understand this new material? What are you going to make them do to understand this new material? How are you going to get them involved in the lesson, right? This is what you do in the development part. And then in the conclusion or consolidation part of the lesson, you round up your lesson. And in this part of the lesson, we normally make sure that our learners have understood what we taught. And this part of the lesson, we normally assess them orally, or we might give them a little quiz and things like that to make sure that they have understood our lesson. In a lesson, we also have learner activity. In other words, you cannot teach for the whole 1 hour, right? If the period is 1 hour period, you can't teach for 1 hour. You have to give the learners an opportunity to apply their knowledge, right? And this is where they either have an exercise from the textbook, or if you prepare a worksheet, you need to give them a worksheet. And this indicates to you as a teacher whether they have understood your lesson or not. So you got to say, where are you getting this learner activity from? Is it from a textbook? Is it from worksheet? If it's from worksheet, you got to attach it, right? So that is the next heading. The last heading in your lesson plan is reflection on planning of the lesson. In other words, after you have planned this lesson, you must think about, did you encounter any challenges, right? Were there challenges? Was it hard to get the material for this topic? Did you get resources for this topic and things like that? So you might have had some challenges in preparing this lesson. And how did you use the resources in your lesson, right? You must reflect, think back. Reflection means think back, right? How did you use? Was it successful? Did you use your resources appropriately, right? Learner participation. In your lesson planning, did you make allowance for learners to participate? How did you make this allowance? Did you ask questions? Did you do an interactive chart? Did you call them out to the front to do some role playing? This is what we mean by learner participation. Did you use a variety of questions, right? Remember when we did Bloom's taxonomy, we said there's lower, middle, and higher order questions. Did you only ask lower order questions? Did you ask questions to influence critical thinking? So this is how you reflect back on your preparation of your lesson. And finally, references. What books or what material did you use that helped you in planning this lesson? Did you use the textbook? You must write down the textbook. Did you get any articles or information from the internet? Then you must write down that as well. So very quickly, this is the format that we are going to be using for preparing our lesson. Now, what we're going to do when we look at the next, when we look at the PowerPoint slides for lesson planning, the PowerPoint slides help us to populate this lesson plan structure. In other words, the PowerPoint slides are going to tell us what we're going to put in all these sections of the lesson plan. So let me share the screen with you with the PowerPoint. Right, so lesson planning, prerequisites. Prerequisites mean what you need beforehand. Before you start planning your lesson, you cannot just take that lesson plan structure and start writing your lesson plan. You can't do that. You have to there are certain things that you need that will help you to write your lesson plan. So there are two things that you need to help you to write your lesson plan. The first is the CAPS document for your subject. So where are you going to find this CAPS document? You will find the CAPS document for your subject on the internet, right? You also need the textbook for that grade and subject. Now, normally they have two textbooks. They have a learner's guide and a teacher's guide, right? So you need to try to get hold of a textbook for your specialization subjects for a particular grade. And I would suggest, if you're doing the senior FET phase, get for a grade 10. Don't go for grade 12 straight away, right? So the CAPS document is an important document, because this is the document that teachers are supposed to be using in schools, from where they get their topics for teaching for the various grades. The CAPS document has been structured to develop the topics over the phase of the grades, right? So you will find grade 10, 11, and 12. In those grades, there's one topic, but it develops over the years, right? So all the CAPS documents, when you find it on the internet, all the CAPS documents have the standardized cover, this orange and green. The subject is written on the side. There's its business studies, and this is the CAPS document for grades 10 to 11. Now, what do we find in the CAPS document? In the CAPS document, you will find a section called specific aims. Now, you remember in the lesson plan structure, there was a heading called specific aims. Now, when you look at the specific aims in the CAPS document, you will take the specific aims from the CAPS document and you will write it in your lesson plan, but you do not take all the specific aims. You must read the specific aims and you must match it to the topic that you have selected. So you cannot take all the specific aims from the CAPS document. You have to match it, right? The other thing that the CAPS document have is time allocation. Time allocation means how much time is given for your subject per week, right? So I know for mathematics, it's 4.5 hours per week, right? That means if the school has 1 hour periods, so on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they will have 1 hour of mathematics each day. And on Friday, they may have half an hour of mathematics. So the CAPS document gives you the time that is spent on each subject per week. It also gives you the year plan and the term plans. Now, this is where you will find your topic in the term plans, right? And in the term plans, they give you the topic, the context, and the content, the resources that you have to use, as well as the assessments that you will have to use. Okay, so that is the what you call the CAPS document. Sam Kaliswa, have you a question?
Yes, I've got a question. Regarding the time allocation, I'm sorry to disturb you. Regarding the time allocation, as you said that it's written in terms of, you said a term or a week. When doing a lesson, do I maybe change the time to a day, or I just leave it as it is?
No, you got to change it. See, when you're doing your lesson plan is for only one lesson. And that one lesson can't be more than 1 hour. Okay? Am I understood?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so that's the CAPS document, and that's the information you get from the CAPS document. Now, this is a page where the time allocation is that I was talking about. If you take, like, say, as I said, mathematics, it is 4.5 hours, and that means it is for the week, for the whole week, it's 4.5 hours. But if you are teaching one lesson, it will be for only 1 hour, right? So that gives you the time allocation. I'm just going through very quickly the CAPS document. In the CAPS document, as I said, there are a number of specific aims, or it can be purpose, right? It can be specific aims or purpose, right? So you might not get the heading specific aims in your CAPS document. In some of the CAPS documents, it says purpose of the subject, right? And that is where you will find the specific aim. Now, I've taken a business studies CAPS document. So if you look here, in this slide, this is one of the pages that I've got for term. It's a term plan. It's called a term plan. In the first column, it tells you week and hour. So 2 weeks and the number of hours. It's week 5 and 6. So in week 5 and 6 of term 2, the topic that they will be teaching is forms of ownership, right? So for those 2 weeks in business studies for grade 10, they will be teaching forms of ownership. And the content they will be teaching, and these are the things that they will teach under the forms of ownership. So definition, characteristics, advantages, disadvantages, all those things, sole proprietorship, partnership, close cooperation, all these things they will teach in these 2 weeks. But you cannot teach it in one lesson. And that is why, as a teacher, you will have to break this up into 1-hour lessons, right? So you will notice a little later on when we do an example lesson plan, we have in one of the lessons, the example lesson plan, we only took sole proprietorship and partnership for 1 lesson, right? So you spread out your teaching in those 2 weeks, right? And then they've got your resources that you can use, and so the CAPS document is there to help you to prepare your lesson. So this is what I've discussed in I've discussed each column with you in the previous slide. So I'm not going to waste my time with that one. Okay, that's a self-activity that you can do. The next important prerequisite. So the first one is the CAPS document, from where you will get your topic, where you will get your content and your time allocation. The next important thing is the textbook, right? And you must follow, because most of the textbooks are aligned to the CAPS document. In other words, the textbooks follow the topics that are there in the CAPS document, right? So once you've selected the topic and the concept or content area, you now look at the relevant textbooks, right? What the textbook does, it focuses you. It tells you exactly what you must teach, right? Because if you do not have the textbook, let's say if you go and Google the topic of your lesson, if you Google the topic of the lesson, the problem there is you're going to get pages and pages of information. You will not know where to start and where to end. So what the textbook does for you, the textbook focuses your attention on the things that you need to teach for that topic, right? And that is why I always tell my students, don't rely on Google, because Google, you get confused. You don't know where. There's so much, it's what we call information overload. Google gives you information overload and you won't know where to start and where to end. But what the textbook does, it focuses your attention, right? So as I said to you, there are textbooks for the teacher's guide and learner's guide, right? So the teacher's guide tells you what to teach. It also helps you to it gives you an idea of how to teach it, what teaching method to use, and what resources to use. And it focuses you on the concept and the content that needs to be taught. The learner's guide gives you more activities. It gives us activities which the learners need to do and assessments. Now, before I continue, I mentioned 2 things, concept and content. So let me make it clear, right? I'll make it easy for you to understand. So if you take a topic, let's just take a topic like, say, I'm going to teach volcanoes. I'm going to teach volcanoes. Now, volcanoes, there are many things that I can teach under volcanoes. But in a lesson, I'm just going to select 2 things. I'm going to talk about the causes of volcanoes and the consequences of volcanic eruptions, right? So Those are my concepts. Those two concepts I will teach: the causes of volcanoes and the consequences of volcanic eruptions. So those will become my concepts. So concepts are like your subheadings. Your main heading is volcano. Your concepts is your subheadings. So under each concept, there will be content. In other words, what am I going to teach under it? So if I'm going to talk about the causes of volcanoes, my content will be the movement of the earth, the plates of the earth, and the friction among the plates and so on. All those things I will discuss under the concept causes. And the consequences of volcanic eruption, we'll talk about how it affects the community, air pollution, the evacuation policies, and so on. So the concept are the broad subheadings, and the content is the detail that you will teach under each one. So you must understand what we mean by concept and content, right? So on this slide here, on slide 10, you will find that there's a recording, right? So when you look at this, and there is a text on the slide at the bottom, when you go through these slides, you must listen to the recording. I have done the recording, and it summarizes what we have done so far. Right, so this is firstly the prerequisites. See, before we start, these are the things that we need to do. The next part of our lesson is the lesson objectives, right? Before you write your lesson objectives, you must be familiar with your teaching and learning material before you write your objectives. Simply what this means: before you teach your lesson, you yourself as a teacher, you must learn the lesson. Because when you know your subject well, that gives you the confidence to stand in front of the class and deliver your lesson. If you are not familiar with your lesson, then you are going to be less confident. It is going to show in the classroom, and the learners will pick it up. And that is why I always tell all my students, before you teach a lesson or before you prepare a lesson, know what exactly you are going to be teaching, read it in the textbook, do it as if you are learning for an exam, and then it makes it easy for you to write. So what are these things that we call objectives? Objectives are what you would like the learners to achieve after you have taught the lesson, right? Remember, you are teaching this lesson for a purpose. And the purpose is that the learners must gain something from what you are teaching. So what we have done, we have divided it into three parts. There's three types of objectives that we write. The first thing is knowledge. Obviously, when you teach a topic, we are delivering knowledge. So when you write this objective on knowledge, we always start with these words. Learners should be able to understand, or they should be able to gain some knowledge, or they should be able to describe, and so on. And then whatever you want them to understand. So the first part is knowledge. The second part of the objective is skills. Here, we need to make them do something. When you think about the word skills, think about doing, right? Learners should be able to analyze. They should be able to draw something. They should be able to create something from the knowledge that you have given them, right? So if you have given them For example, learners should be able to create a chart of a volcano and label the various parts of the volcano. That's the that's what we would mean by skills. Value is something that will remain with them for the rest of their lives, right? So it is something that is important, something that would stick to them. And here they must be able to appreciate, after you taught this lesson, they must be able to appreciate the circumstances. For example, I'm just saying, learners should be able to appreciate the circumstances under which people live when they are close to volcanoes, right? They should be able to appreciate the hardships they go through when volcanoes erupt and things like that. So those are the objectives, right? In the next slide, we have the examples of some objectives which you need to read on your own. So before we actually start writing the lesson plan, we do what is called a draft lesson. And the draft lesson plan is normally follows the format of the lesson plan. Okay, so before I continue, unfortunately, our Zoom meetings are short, and it would cut off at any time. But I'm going to go as far as I can. If I do not complete this, I will schedule another Zoom meeting to complete this, because this is very, very important for your lessons, right? Lesson planning. So this is a spider diagram. This is a template, right, that you can use to write your draft lesson plan. So I've just put headings here, but in the next one, you will see I've put some details, right? So here in the middle, we've got our topic, objectives under knowledge K, S, and V, knowledge, skills, and value. Objectives are always written like that, right? And then I put in the details of what we are writing in for objectives. Introduction, I put in some details here. Development, right? Some details, and conclusion. Now, these are not actually, sorry, I'm using the wrong word. It's not details. I've briefly put in things that I will do in these different phases. I will then take the spider diagram, and when I'm writing the lesson plan in full, that is where we will put in the details, right? So this helps us to structure our lesson plan, right? So this is just a summary of the pre-planning phase of the lesson plan, which you can read on your own. So it's all the things that we said. So some tips. Now, this is actual writing when you write. Some tips when writing your lesson plan. Instead of saying the teacher will paste a chart on the chalkboard, simply say a chart will be displayed on the chalkboard. Do not use the words that teacher will, right? Many students always say that who is the teacher? You are the teacher. So you don't have to say that all the time. I will ask learners, you don't have to keep saying that, right? You just say the following questions will be asked. Avoid writing long sentences. Ensure that there's a flow in your lesson from introduction to development and finally to conclusion. Time your lesson so that learners are given sufficient activities. Note, you cannot speak for the entire 1 hour. I told you that at the beginning. So this is the first phase of your lesson, the introduction, right? So there is a recording on this page as well. You need to listen to that recording, right? So it says here, refer to page 205 of Getting Practical. Read the paragraph on how learners advise on how not to begin your lesson. Okay, if you do not have the textbook, what this page said was, learners do not like it when a teacher walks into the classroom and say, good morning, class. Today our topic is, and they start writing the topic on the board, right? What we need to do is to create an introduction. We must create what we call a dynamic introduction. We must lead the learners to the topic. We cannot, in your lesson, do not mention the topic first. you have to lead the learners to that topic, right? By asking questions, by introducing the topic, by using resources. These are different ways of introducing a lesson. Now, we have a document that I will send to you, which gives you ideas on how to introduce a topic, which I will send to you later. So the most important part of the lesson is the development part of the lesson. Here, the focus in this section are on the concepts of the topic under discussion. I explained to you what concepts are. The content of the lesson focuses on what is to be taught for each of the concepts. If you take two concepts, you must talk about exactly what you're going to teach under that topic, right? So refer to your draft plan before you write, that is that spider diagram. Refer to the lesson plan example, which I will also give to you. Identify the content that relates to the concept. So you must look at the draft or the lesson plan example that I will send to you just now. Identify the teaching methods and how do the questions help in the lesson. You must write questions to ask the learners questions as you are teaching to see whether they are following your lesson, right? So the concepts and the content of your lesson can be found in the textbooks. It can be found in internet, newspapers, etc. It is your task as a teacher to break down the material into simple, understandable units for your learners. Your choice of teaching methods, resources, and types of questions you will ask in this phase will help in sequencing your lesson and making it simple for them to understand. Sequencing your lesson means you do it step by step. You don't jump from one topic to another, right? You also need to be familiar with the material before you begin your planning and teaching. In other words, you have to learn your material first. That's what I said to you. The consolidation part of your lesson. When you conclude your lesson, you focus on the core concepts and determine whether your objectives have been met. So one of the things that you can do in this phase is to ask questions to see whether your learners have understood your lesson. And here you must be creative a bit. You don't have to only ask questions. You can do a little quiz, play a small game. You can do some role playing. You can create like a small spider diagram or a brain map and ask them to fill it. So you must think about creative ways in which to conclude your lesson. Right? So in this PowerPoint slide, you will find there are, you need to go through it again. And there are slides where you have recordings, where you have to listen to the recordings. Right? So I just want to quickly show you the example lesson plan as well. So this is an example lesson plan, which you need to go through as well, right? I wrote this lesson plan and it is, okay, I didn't put student name and number, right? Because I wrote it. So you can see this is how the table has been full. XYZ Secondary School, grade 10, business studies, forms of ownership, and the concept and content, sole proprietorship and partnership. That's a 2. And what are we doing under that? We are doing definition, characteristics, advantages and disadvantages, and differences between the two. Where did I get all this from? The CAPS document. It's page number 17 in the CAPS document, 1 hour. Specific aim, can you see I only took 1. Acquire and apply essential business knowledge, skills, and principles to productively and profitably conduct business in changing business environments. This has been taken straight from